So, I usually try to post a video about every other week, and I have been trying to bank several, but I have been doing a lot of traveling in the last month or so. One of the things that I do on the side is that I am a pyrotechnician. I put on fireworks shows for several cities for America's Independence Day. It is hot, sweaty, and at times tedious work. But when it's showtime, standing less than 100 feet from a professional grade fireworks show, it's a feeling like no other. The small consumer grade fireworks just don't really impress anymore. I was on the crew that put on 3 shows, and they all went great. I do have all of my fingers, but that is why I am a little late in getting this video out. I hope that my fellow Americans had a great Independence Day. And for any international viewers, I hope that you had a great week. Mormon women used to enjoy the privileges of washing, anointing, and blessing other women and their children the same way that priesthood holders do the same in the current church. This was the case for roughly a century. Then, sometime between the 1920s and 1940s, this long-held practice was taken from Mormon women. Today, we are going to give the priesthood back to women. Welcome, friends, enemies, and everyone in between, to my channel, The Masked Mormon. I am in fact the Masked Mormon.
Why are you wearing a mask? Were you burned by acid or something like that?
Oh no, it's just they're terribly comfortable. I think everyone will be wearing them in the future.
I'm a Mormon who used to believe in the truth claims of the Mormon Church. I was truly a hardcore believer. Then, after a pretty intense faith crisis, I realized that the church wasn't what it claimed to be. Now, I talk about the implications of Mormon doctrine, history, and some of my own personal experiences, and talk about it on the internet with you fine viewers. So, let's get into it. In Mormonism, priesthood is a very central tenet. However, it can be a pretty tenuous concept. There are 2 main meanings. The first and simplest is that the priesthood is the authority of God. It's believed that this is the authority that God used to create the universe. And it is this authority that God uses to do everything else that he does. The second is that the priesthood is God's authority delegated to man to act in his name to do all the things necessary to bring salvation to God's children. This authority is only given to men, and they are tasked to use it to do everything in the church, from 12-year-old boys passing the sacrament to the highest offices of church leadership. This priesthood is divided into little p priesthoods. The Aaronic priesthood, which is considered a lower priesthood, and is used to administer outward ordinances like baptism and the aforementioned sacrament. The higher priesthood is called the Melchizedek priesthood. This higher priesthood is used for church administration, for blessing people by the laying on of hands, and by performing the ordinances of the temple. These 2 priesthoods are further divided into offices that people can hold in each respective priesthood. For the Aaronic priesthood, the offices are deacon, teacher, priest, and bishop. For the Melchizedek priesthood, the offices are elder, high priest, patriarch, 70, and apostle. And again, of course, these offices are held solely by men. No women allowed. Though the church website will say, quote, "Men and women have different but equally valued roles. Just as women cannot conceive a child without a man, so a man cannot fully exercise the power of the priesthood to establish an eternal family without a woman. In the eternal perspective, both the procreative power and the priesthood power are shared by husband and wife." End quote. However, this is a thought-stopping cliche. Saying that priesthood and childbirth are equivalent yet separate roles for men and women in the church is often a slap in the face to women, especially in the instances, whether by choice or by circumstance, a woman does not or cannot bear children. Also, childbirth and all that leads up to it is a biological action. Women don't bear children without the assistance of men. Egg plus sperm plus uterus plus 9 months equals baby. Imagine if a man couldn't act in a priesthood capacity without the assistance of a woman. Bringing a child into the world is a joint venture between the sexes. Exercising the priesthood is not. Women are not required for a man to exercise priesthood authority or to hold priesthood office in the church. But this isn't just about whether men and women hold a special brand of God magic. As I have previously said in another video, women are unnecessary for the operation of Mormonism. If an area has 100 Mormon women but no Mormon men, then a congregation would not be able to be created. If, however, an area had 100 Mormon men and no Mormon women, a new congregation could be created. Women are largely irrelevant when it comes to organizing the church. At the very least, they are very seldom considered. I have 3 daughters, and I realized very early that they are invisible to the church, except for baptism and if they choose to get married in the temple. It isn't necessarily that some Mormon women want this special God magic, but they want a place at the table where decisions are being made. They want their voices to be heard. But I can hear a believer say that women have leadership opportunities and contribute to the church all the time. They occupy leadership positions all the way up. Well, technically you may be somewhat correct. There are women in presidencies in their local wards and all the way up to the top leadership positions of the women's organization, the Relief Society, the Young Women's Organization, and the primary. But they are always beholden to the male leadership, and they serve at their pleasure. The president of the Relief Society is chosen by a man and serves until a man says that she is to be replaced. There are no women that are really in charge of their organizations. For instance, in 1995, the church put out a proclamation on the family. It was a statement of belief on the importance of the nuclear family that was written so that the church could get involved in a legal case regarding gay marriage that was occurring in Hawaii. After it was written, the 3 women of the Relief Society presidency were called into a meeting. One of the women in attendance at this meeting was Cheiko Okazaki, one of the counselors in the presidency. The proclamation was read to them. When it was finished, the only question that was asked was whether the proclamation should be presented at the priesthood meeting or at the Relief Society meeting. Cheiko Okazaki didn't really care where it was presented, but she was upset. She said, quote, "How come we, the women, weren't consulted?" End quote. They didn't even know that this proclamation was in the works. It was ultimately decided to present it at the Relief Society meeting, but the voice of the women wasn't even considered. Okazaki said, again, quote, "But as I read it, I thought that we could have made a few changes to it." End quote. Additionally, the women already had a planned agenda for the meeting with the speakers already lined up. But that was all disregarded so that this proclamation could take center stage. They didn't have a voice in preparing the document, and when it was ready, the leadership ended up overriding what the women had planned, such as it is at all levels of the church. Sure, women may sit in on meetings, but they lack any real voice. Her suggestions can be overridden at any point by the bishop or any other leader. As Sister Okazaki later said, quote, "Sometimes I think the brethren get so busy that they forget that we are there." End quote. Women have been largely stripped of power in Mormonism. In the early days of the church, It was not uncommon for women to participate in administering blessings of healing, something that is today reserved only for men. By the 1880s, LDS women had developed rituals of washing and anointing other women who were about to give birth. And before that, during the Nauvoo era, women would lay hands on the heads of people to give them blessings of healing. Joseph Smith himself said, quote, "Respecting the female laying on of hands, there could be no devil in it if God gave his sanction by healing. There could be no more sin in any female laying hands on the sick than in wetting the face with water. It is no sin for anybody to do it that has faith, or if the sick has the faith to be healed by the administration." End quote. By the early 20th century, this ability was stripped away from women by the church president, who instructed men to do it instead. So even though these women didn't have a priesthood or priesthood office, for a time, roughly a century, they could administer according to their faith. Today, we are going to wrest some of that power back and carve out a priesthood, or should we call it a priestesshood, for women. Now, full disclosure, I don't believe in the power of the priesthood, or in faith healings, or in the miraculous. But that isn't the point of this exercise. Now again, I recognize the irony in me, a man, going through this exercise, but it should still be an interesting exercise nonetheless. And as I was thinking about this topic, I sat down with my wife, the Mass Mistress, and we talked for a couple of hours about what this would look like. I kind of wished that I had turned on the camera for that discussion. It was actually pretty good. But she did make a good point very early on. We would have to fix the organizational structure of the church first, before we design a matriarchal priesthood. Why? Because if we just add a priesthood for women, with offices for them, the church will still end up just as sexually segregated as it currently is. And you don't really accomplish the main purpose, which is making sure women have a voice in the direction of the church. So, let's fix the church first. The church has always been, and likely always will be, a very hierarchical, top-down sort of organization. For those of you who may not know, here is a quick rundown of the organizational structure of the church. At the very top is the president of the church, who is considered a prophet. He has 2 counselors, and the 3 of them are called the First Presidency. The counselors are selected from the next layer of church leadership, which is the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. The Quorum of the 12 and First Presidency set the direction of the church. These 15 men are in charge of the corporate church. Members of the church believe that the Quorum of the 12 represent Jesus throughout the world. Under the Quorum of the 12 Apostles are several quorums of the 70. These men support and implement the decisions of the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency. They travel and administer the church throughout the world. These men serve in area presidencies that have authority over various geographical regions. On a local level are stake presidents who are in charge of 5 to 10 congregations, and bishops who are in charge of the local congregation. And under them are the various local leaders that divvy up the congregational responsibilities. Women do get local opportunities to serve in leadership opportunities all over. Women do get local opportunities to serve in leadership opportunities over other women and children. In an article by the Salt Lake Tribune in May of 2024, Peggy Fletcher Stack said that women are not actually considered part of the church's top-tier leadership. Every 6 months, Mormons gather for a conference where they raise their hands in support of their leaders. None of these people that are presented to the membership are women. No matter how many women belong to the church or how many advances they make in the hierarchy, they are not considered leaders, even though they may hold high-level positions. It's the men that call the shots, and the chain of command is from one man to another. Women are consultants. They're not leaders, according to the article. So it isn't enough just to organize a priesthood for them. There needs to be a route for them to enter church leadership. So I propose a patriarchal priesthood that is organized how it currently is, and a matriarchal priestesshood. Recall, the offices in the Aaronic and Melchizedek priesthood are, in ascending order, deacon, teacher, priest, bishop, elder, apostle. Similarly, for the matriarchal priestesshood, there would be several offices. The names of these offices can be different, but deacon and teacher could remain the same and have the same responsibilities as they do in the patriarchal priesthood. Similarly, the office of priestess would hold similar responsibilities as priests. The higher offices of the matriarchal priestesshood would be matron, similar to an elder, high priestess, similar to a high priest, 70, and apostle. Currently, the offices of the Aaronic priesthood are given to boys when they turn 12. In non-Mormon churches, the office of deacon would be a respected office. But in Mormonism, a deacon is just a 12-year-old boy who passes the emblems of the sacrament around. A teacher is a 14-year-old boy, and a priest is a 16-year-old boy. The words deacon, teacher, and priest have very different meanings between Mormonism and mainstream Christianity. Instead of having these age delineations for priesthood advancement, return to how it was previously done in centuries past in the Mormon Church, where a man would qualify for the various offices in the priesthood. This would be similar to the priestesshood. Sure, you could ordain a boy at 12 to the Aaronic priesthood, but he is not ordained a deacon unless he meets certain qualifications. This would be mirrored in the matriarchal priestesshood. These qualifications could be like the qualifications that were used to advance a person through scouts or something like that. The person had to be actively engaged and meet specific qualifications in order to advance to the next rank. When ordained to a priest or priestesshood, there is still a hierarchy a person could climb. But if a person wants more rights and responsibilities, they would need to work toward each advancement. These could be a series of devotional, service, and organizational responsibilities to fill. These offices would have mentors that would teach and encourage. The mentors would be men and women of higher priest or priestesshood office. No longer would a person be advanced in the priesthood just because of their age, though the various offices could still be opened up at some of the younger ages. Now, anyone who has attended a Sunday school class, Relief Society, or Elders Quorum class knows how awful the teaching material is and how anemic the teaching itself is. Teaching is an important skill that needs to be taught. The church needs professors that can teach and teach how to teach. Additionally, Mormons need instruction in public speaking. A professor, or I don't know, maybe we could name it something else, would teach Mormons how to teach and how to speak in public. There would still be Relief Society and Elders Quorum groups, and these would handle the spiritual needs of the ward. They could mentor and direct the members of their respective groups. Each of these respective presidents would have gained experience over the years and be well qualified for taking on these responsibilities. Additionally, they would receive a small stipend for their time. This would become the lowest paid position in the new church that we're now reorganizing. Payment of people would be a necessary step because they would be giving up time with their families and other responsibilities to serve the church. It could also be an incentive for people to try to receive the qualifications of such a position. The patriarchal and matriarchal priesthoods would each have a leadership route that would eventually come together as members advanced through the offices. They would converge at the office of bishop. A bishop would take on the temporal and administration aspects of the ward. This would be a man or woman who advanced through the ranks of their respective priesthood. They would be gaining experience and training along the way, unlike the current Mormon bishops who receive no training whatsoever. Also, like the Elders Quorum and Relief Society president, the bishop would also receive a modest stipend for their time. Stake presidents would be the administrators that would manage a group of bishops, and they would organize training in the various wards. They would also see to the training of the professors. Bishops and stake presidents would oversee the more global matters that concern the ward or the stake. There would be two main tracks a member could take: a teaching track, where they could eventually qualify as a professor, and an administrative track, where a man or a woman could eventually become a bishop or stake president or something higher. For instance, these tracks would also feed into the quorums of the 70 and the quorum of the 12. A person could switch tracks if they so desired, and took the necessary training and received the experience needed for the desired roles. This would help the church move away from untrained volunteers bumbling through church positions. Vetting and background checks would occur. That said, this wouldn't eliminate all the organizational corruption and abuse that happens in the current church, but it would help provide more quality checks than currently happens, which, again, unfortunately, is none. At one point in history, Mormon church buildings were centers where the community could come together for religious, social, and cultural events. Church buildings even still call their gyms the cultural hall. This is a vestigial phrase that links back to an era when church buildings hosted road shows, plays, concerts, talent shows, community service events, etc. However, except for a limited number of hours during the week, the church buildings are always closed. Church buildings could return to a prominent position in the members' lives if there was a position of building or grounds manager, someone who lived near or on the grounds who would open and handle building scheduling for events on a daily basis. Things like exercise classes, music lessons, tutoring, a meeting place for teenagers, and whatever else you could imagine. The main excuse that Salt Lake gives for not doing these sorts of things is fear of liability. But there are ways around this. There is no reason why church buildings couldn't be versatile cultural and social gathering places. Additionally, since we're on the subject, instead of having the members clean the buildings, rehire custodial services to maintain the cleanliness of the buildings. Because organizations still need money to operate, tithing would still be a thing. But each year there would be a transparent and complete accounting of how much money came in and what it was used for. Tithing would not be tied to the temple recommend any longer, and a model of tithing that encouraged tithing on a person's surplus instead of their gross or net income. Tithing is a regressive tax on the poor in Mormonism, and the way it is currently practiced keeps poorer members mired in financial dire straits. Missions would also be redesigned. All missions would be service missions. A person would go into an area and render actual aid to people there. Mission presidents and missions would develop the infrastructure to render substantive aid to the region that they are serving. That could be building houses or battling poverty in developed nations, or digging wells and establishing schools in developing nations. But missionaries would partner with locals to determine what is needed most. You know, doing things that Jesus apparently said. I don't know, something, something, take care of the poor and needy, the fatherless and the widows, and the yada, yada, yada. The length of a mission would be variable. A person could choose to serve 6, 12, 18, or 24 months. And to serve as an incentive, certain qualifications for advancement to higher priesthood or priestesshood offices could be available from serving a mission. Currently, a mission doesn't really do anything for the person besides convert them to the church more strongly. Organizing missions to provide humanitarian service instead of proselytizing would be much more in line with what Jesus taught. You know, the taking care of the poor and needy, feeding the hungry, all that stuff that I was talking about before. These sorts of things would likely bring people into the church much more effectively than the failing missionary program that is currently in use. So, to sum up, women would be given a matriarchal priestesshood, which would also include a set of ordinances like blessings, washings, and anointings that women would be able to administer. The various offices of these priesthood and priestesshood would come with various educational and administrative responsibilities and qualifications in order to advance. These responsibilities and qualifications would be taught by mentors and professors. Elders Quorum and Relief Society presidencies would receive a small stipend for their time. These priesthoods would converge at the office of bishop, who would take care of the administrative responsibilities of the ward. A person could then advance up the ranks to stake president, quorum of the 70, quorum of the 12, and even, eventually, president of the church, who could be a man or a woman. So, those are my ideas. What do you think? What would you like included or taken out? Would this be a better church to be a part of, even if you weren't a believer? Would this be a better place for people to be? Let me know down in the comments. And if you like what I do, please press the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.